I'm going to be looking at 3 completely different ways to answer the same question, a very tough question from my final physics quiz. The first method I'm going to use is the first depth, second depth method. Not very popular with a lot of people, but some people love it. It's very quick and effective. Then I'm going to look at using the 1, 2, 3 approach to answer it. And the 1, 2, 3 approach in 2 different ways, basically. There are 2 variables to deal with in this question. The fact that the amount of time you're spending is changing and the fact that the depth you're at is changing. So which order you deal with those 2 changes in variables might change the 1, 2, 3 approach. 3 different ways to answer this question. It's a tough question. The reason it's tough is because there are 2 variables being changed. Let's just focus on the depth, the first depth, which is 20 meters, therefore 3 atmospheres. And let's divide that by the second depth, the first depth, second depth method. 10 meters is 2 atmospheres. That gives us 3 divided by 2 equals 1.5. That is our change factor. What are we going to do with this change factor? Well, let's look at the number of psi we breathe through at the start. According to the question, it's 100 psi, and we're going to use the number 1.5 to change it. We're going to divide by 1.5. 100 divided by 1.5 gives us 66.6 psi. What have we found there? We have found the number of psi we would breathe through in 20 minutes at 10 meters. But it's 20 minutes. And how many minutes are we spending at 10 meters? Only 10 minutes. We're spending half as much time there. So we need to divide our answer. What do we need to divide it by? 2. So it's 66.66 divided by 2 gives us 33.33. And that is the number of psi we would breathe through in 10 minutes at 10 meters if we breathe through 100 psi of air in 20 minutes at 20 meters. Let's look at a different way we might have answered this question. Same question, but this time I'm going to focus on the fact that the answers are all in psi and start with the number of psi I'm given in the question. So let's start with 100 psi. And then we need to look at the first depth, the starting depth. It's 20 meters. Let's turn that into a 3. Let's pause and think, do we multiply or divide? Well, I am going through 100 psi of air and I want to work out how many psi of air I will go through at the surface. I want to make the number of psi smaller because I know I'll breathe through less psi of air at the surface than I would at 20 meters. So we've now calculated 33.33 psi of air in 20 minutes at the surface. So let's take that and work out how many psi of air I'm breathing through per minute. And 33.33 divided by 20 will give me the amount of psi I will be breathing through per minute at the surface. I'm going to breathe through 1.66 psi of air per minute at the surface. Now I need to work out how many psi of air I will breathe through at 10 meters. I know it's going to be more, so I'm going to multiply. And I know that at 10 meters, the pressure is 2 atmospheres. So 1.66 times 2 is going to tell me how many psi per minute I will breathe through at 10 meters. And the final thing I need to do is work out how many psi I will breathe through in 10 minutes at 10 meters. So I need to take my 3.33 psi and I need to multiply by 10 to convert from the per minute rate to the 10 minutes. And that gives me, amazingly enough, the same answer, 33.33 psi. So there is one more approach I could have possibly taken to answering this question. It's going to be the 1, 2, 3 approach again, but just a subtly different way of analysing the question and working through the information I've been given. So I look at the answers and I see they're all in PSI, so I look for PSI in the question and find it. It's 100 PSI, and I put that on my bit of paper. I then look at the depth at which I'm breathing through 100 PSI and work out that's 3 atmospheres. I want to go to the surface when I'm using the 1, 2, 3 approach, and I know I will breathe through less PSI of air at the surface than I would at 20 meters, so I need to make the number smaller. I need to divide, and I get my 33.33 PSI of air in 20 minutes at the surface. Now let's take it down to 10 meters, which is 2 atmospheres. And I know I'm going to breathe through more PSI of air at 10 meters than I would at the surface, so I want to make 33.33 bigger. I'm going to multiply. 33.33 times 2 is 66.66. That is possibly what you did and how you got the 66.66 answer if you did get it wrong and did answer that. But what you actually worked out was how many PSI of air you're going to breathe through in 20 minutes at 10 meters. And the question is asking us how many PSI of air will we breathe through in 10 minutes at 10 meters. So I need to take my 20 minutes and I need to half it. I need to take my 66.66 PSI and I need to divide it by 2 to work out how many PSI I will breathe through in half the time, in 10 minutes as opposed to 20 minutes, at 10 meters as opposed to 20 meters. All 3 solutions give us the same answer. They're all equally valid. It's just whichever one makes the most sense.